course involves basically just the nuts and bolts of greenhouse construction. You know, we've gone all over the site considerations, orientation, and application as far as that's concerned, you know, the ventilation. So this is basically what I'm going to go through with you folks are the materials that are commonly used in greenhouses, purchased materials, for instance, from vendors that manufacture horticultural greenhouses. Then we'll talk a bit about what you can do from a lumberyard for your own use, you know, versus buying a pre-manufactured kits, which are top of the line as far as cost is concerned. Prices range on an aluminum and glass greenhouse. Your upper end, like the Lord & Burnham, which has been, Lord & Burnham's been involved in greenhouse design and build since the mid-1800s, where they typically used wood cypress for their framing and then steel as superstructures, to where they moved into the aluminum structure into the 40s. They started getting into the aluminum. Obviously a one-time purchase because it won't rot. Cypress also does not rot typically. There are some bad grains out there, but cypress is a wood from the Carolinas and Georgia area. It's a very oily wood, and it's virtually indestructible as far as insects, very resistant to insects, and obviously moisture, so that was the preferred wood. And that's what that one greenhouse that Keith showed that was scratch built was all cypress. So. But the ranges of costs, aluminum glass greenhouse can go from, I've built them for the materials as little as $75 a square foot up to $500 a square foot, and that's floor space pattern. So, and the range difference is your simple aluminum style, meaning mill finished, no paint, just plain raw aluminum, to conservatories with the finials and crustings and chambers. You know, they'll do one large greenhouse, but they'll put partitions in it to chamber off. They might have an orchid room, they might have a hot house. There's air conditioning units that can be used. Obviously all sorts of propagation tools to be used, shade systems. But the aluminum house has been the preferred I've built. Probably of the 324 greenhouses I've built, probably 315 of them have been aluminum. As far as the domes, the Quonset huts, and there's different styles of those. Bring the roof down. If you want to take that, I can print out another one at the office. Okay. If you want to take that sheet versus taking notes, is that what you're doing?
No.
Oh, you're doing that. Oh, okay. All right. Sorry. So, different styles. That's considered the Quonset style. Then you have your peaked lean-to. This would be against the building. Freestanding. Pretty much, they have some that large commercial freestanding that actually have gutters. And by doing the gutter, you can now add another one, and another one, so that you can gutter connect. The smallest greenhouse I built was this style. It was 3 feet by 5 feet. The largest one I built was gutter connect, and it was 5 acres. So by taking a gutter connect, you can obviously go on for hundreds of feet, but it leaves the whole floor space open as one floor space system. Multiple roofs, a lot of reasons. You can't do a 400-foot wide greenhouse with one peak. So the Dutch kind of came up with the style here where you gutter connect. So you'll see some of them, and the Dutch houses are aluminum and glass, and they're very easy to spot because there'll be multiple small peaks. There'll be one, this might only be 50 feet across. So they do that because each and every one of them ventilates for maximum ventilation. So again, it's one floor space, multiple peaks, water runs freely, structural integrity is maximized, ventilation is maximized. So the Quonset hut, this style here, typically used, a seasonal house, meaning that it's not designed to be so structural that it will hold snow. Typically that will be one layer of 6mm polyethylene, which is a greenhouse grade plastic. It's a diffused plastic. Any type of hoop house you've seen in your travels, it's 6mm polyethylene. There are some other plastics out there. There's the no drip. There's plastics that are designed specifically for growing tomatoes, has a red hue to it. You don't see that often because it's very expensive.
How does that help?
It's just the way the sun rays are moved about. It's what it takes the sun rays and disperses them in a way and enhances the light atmosphere inside for tomato growth. It's not a common practice. People who growing tomatoes, 6mm clear. So some of the issues that these are the least expensive. You can buy a 17 by 96 footer for probably $1,700 or less even. And that's with a heat source and some ventilation. But the issue with this is people are spending a little bit of money and not paying attention to the fact that in the wintertime when it snows, the snow does this, the snow does this, the greenhouse does this. So when I'm selling this greenhouse to a customer that I suspect is going to be using it year-round or in the winter, maybe they're going to start in March, and in Vermont, as a lot of you may know, it's still winter here, or can be, is I will suggest highly a winter support kit. It's basically just 2x4s, and this is going to give you an edge view looking down, just two 2x6s screwed together so it forms a T. And then on the bottom we do a 2x6 as a plate, and we dangle it about 6 inches above the ground so that it just dangles perfectly. Because if you plant it on the ground and the snow starts to build up, it might have a tendency to push that to the left or to the right, and then you lose the integrity of that. This way here, as the weight builds up, the greenhouse comes down, and this actually makes contact with the ground. Boom, right there. And then it can take the load. So big or small type of greenhouse, if you're going to start out with an inexpensive starter house, is what they call these starter houses. Consider your winter support kit every 4 feet. And that's how the bows run, every 4 feet. And that's typical with all hoop houses, is every 4 foot is the bow, what we call a bow spacing. These houses here, which the high tunnel term has not been around a lot, probably within the last 10 years. We would just call these a peaked house. It's still plastic from ground up. There's a ridge line there. There's typically 1 or 2 sets of purlins, and these run the length of the greenhouse. These will hold the snow. This is sometimes like 3 feet off ground until you start to get to the arc. So the snow really has to build up quite a bit before it gets to this point. If you're negligent in the fact that you're not plowing, you heard Keith mention that he'll plow. He's moving this snow away so that snow can continue to fall. And he'll move it away and snow can continue to fall, so that's your fail-safe. A lot of times these houses will come with a truss system, what we call a W truss. And it's basically just that. Looks like a W. So that can hold the weight of snow, and it's the weight of the wind. And again, these are every 4 feet. So, and then people will do, what they'll do that is they'll hang their plants from this. They'll run pipes of full length, and then they'll hang their plants. So they not only gain from their plant benches space with their plants, they now have hanging basket space. So they're doubling their footprint of the greenhouse. So you might buy a 30 by 48 and actually have a 30 by 96 as far as ground is concerned, or plant space is concerned. Adding the plant weight to the roof system, it's not a problem with if you go with the truss. The truss kits are $110 a piece, and some people want them and some people don't. Specifically retail for the hanging plants.
$110 a piece, and you need one for each.
Right.
Every 4 feet.
Every 4 feet, yes. And like I say, it's mainly, not mainly for, but people buy them more specifically so that they can double their floor space retail. Because what, the difference between retail and commercial is quite a bit on how a greenhouse is designed, what type of covering you're going to use. In a retail space, your objective is to move product. You buy locally, you typically don't grow it yourself, your flowers to put into your greenhouse to sell to retail. You're buying from a wholesaler. So you get it in, you mark it up, you want to sell it. So in order to keep a customer inside of a greenhouse, what do you think is important? What happens when the sun's out in the greenhouses? You know that answer, right? It heats up. So if you've got a customer walking into a greenhouse that's 100 degrees or even 95, how long do you think they're going to stay there and shop? Probably not long. So what people do to get around that is they'll go with a bronze covering or a shade cloth to cover their plastic covered greenhouses. And you can get shade cloth is quite inexpensive. You get different coefficients. You can go from 20% to 100% coefficiency. And basically that just drapes over the greenhouse like a piece of plastic.
What type of material, like what is that?
This is polycarbonate, and I'll get more into this. But this bronze keeps the greenhouse cooler, 15, 20 degrees, which means the customer is going to stay in there longer and maybe buy one more plant. So that's the big difference between commercial, growing, and retail. One of the differences. A lot of retail houses also have a tendency to be the aluminum and glass, the aesthetic, the appeal. It brings the customer in versus a plastic covered hoop house, which is the norm, but you go to the next bump up and it really draws the attention. So the lean-to greenhouse, that's the typical mom and pop situation. Just a small lean-to, which would basically, this would be considered, this is a gable end profile of the aluminum. This would be considered a lean-to. Here's your house, it's leaning up against it. It's designed, most of them, between a 4.5 and a 6/12 pitch in the roof system. What I'd like to introduce, if a person wants a 12 by 20 foot greenhouse lean-to, I'll sell them maybe an 8 by 20 foot greenhouse and do that conventional constructed roof, wood framed roof, to combat the summer sun, which was a lot of what Keith talked about also. So that they get the same floor space they were hoping for, the 12 by 20, but they're only buying an 8 by 20 greenhouse, and it's cooler. So in these, this is the working functional ridge vent, and then there'll be one on the side that does this. These can be, venting can be manual, meaning you get out there in the morning and you pull a cord and it articulates up, or thermostatically controlled, which is all, if you're going to be away, everybody works together. Some of the brain systems that we use in the greenhouses can control the ventilation, the lighting, the heat, propagation. They'll even call a number of people if the heat goes down in greenhouse number 1. It picks the phone up and dials your favorite brother-in-law, maybe, or not so favorite brother-in-law, and say greenhouse 1 heat is down, get your butt over there and find out what's going on. So a lot of technology can go into these greenhouses, and it basically just runs itself. It gets hot in there, vent opens up a quarter, it continues to rise in temperature, opens up, continues to rise, it opens up, it's still getting hot, side vent opens a crack. So this guy's wide open, this one cracks, and it continues. If they have a cooling system in there outside of natural ventilation, it will turn the air conditioning system on. If the temperature continues to rise, there's a shade system that will shut. Interior shading system, all automatic, boom, shuts the sun right out, and then things cool right down, and then all of a sudden vents start to shut and cooling systems go off. So you can really get automated with your greenhouse, or you can have a simple crank the vent open in the morning and close it at night scenario, which is, people kind of choose the middle of the run at this point. The greenhouse I'm building right now, which I did bring plans for, I can show, leave it out for people who want to take a look at it, is a 24 by 48 foot aluminum and glass greenhouse, personal use, just a hobby. $140,000 for the materials, just for fun. It's completely automated. So they could be gone for a month and their greenhouse is going to be taken care of. So that one I just referenced is a freestanding. People will they'll choose this for a number of reasons. It's attached to the home. If they want to do their vegetables, they can go from the kitchen to the greenhouse and pick their lettuces or their tomatoes or their cut flowers, or it's acting as a solar passive unit, attachment to the home. They're gaining that solar passive heat gain from it. I've seen nothing but a hot tub in a lot of them, and then there's some you come across and they've got the bike stored in there and the old lawnmower, and it's just, I built a greenhouse years ago. I was sitting down at the kitchen table collecting the last check. His wife had gone to Europe for a month. He bought her the greenhouse as a gift. She walked in the door and she says, "What the hell am I going to do with that?" I reached over and grabbed that check out the door. And for years I went by it, and he had one plastic plant sitting up in the sill of it, and that was it. So that's just a lesson in communication with your better half. I felt bad for him.
Those are to look out for when you're trying to salvage these things.
Exactly, those are good buys. And along those lines, I do a lot of recycling. I purchase recycled greenhouses, refurbish them, reinstall them.
Is there a special place to look for that kind of stuff, or just Craigslist? Or?
Craigslist, and there's a lot of these new, like Jericho's got a new one out. It's like My Front Porch.
Front porch forums.
Yeah. So a lot of these little different type of programs are coming up with for where to find stuff. A lot of times, if you're just riding around, you can really see the greenhouse that's being used or not. And a lot of times, people are just ready to get rid of them. So, they think they want to get into the greenhouse garden business, and they're popping up left and right, as you've probably detected. They're all over the place now. So, the freestanding greenhouses can be set any place. You put it out into a field. You can orientate it a lot of different ways. There's maximum benefit, which we talked about as far as orientation. But really, in a nutshell, if you've got a freestanding greenhouse out in the field, it's going to work. Some of the pitfalls to that is you're running gas and water, and electric at a distance versus connected to your home, where you can utilize the existing sources. Any glass and aluminum greenhouse, any greenhouse really that has glass in it, whether it's a wood structure or an aluminum structure, must have a full foundation, a supportive foundation, because of the movement. If you build it on, let's say you've got an existing deck, and you want to put a greenhouse on it with glass in it, unless your footings are a minimum of 4 feet below grade to get below frost, you're going to have movement. If you've got movement, you're going to have breakage, or your vents aren't going to function properly, or your door's not going to open at certain times of year because it's settling and moving. So, and always be checking local codes. Some greenhouses, they're considered a kit. If you do a pure footing scenario, in some towns, some zones, you won't need to have it permitted because it's a removable structure. You can take it down if you were to leave. So, but always check your local codes, for format.
When you're working on a project, are you involved in like how many aspects are you involved in? Are you doing like irrigation and electric and plumbing and everything, or does that get sub?
That gets sub typically because I'm not licensed as a plumber or an electrician. But whatever I sell, I install, and then I'll consult with electricians, plumbers. I typically don't get into the foundations myself because there's people who do that for a living. I'd rather stick to greenhouses, do what I do best. But anything that, I can consult with any of the other subs to make sure it happens the way it should happen. A lot of plumbers and electricians, when they walk into a greenhouse, their dollar sign goes up because they're saying, oh man, I've never done one of these before. But in fact, it's much easier because everything's open. All your conduit's open, all your plumbing's open. It's not like you're drilling through walls or anything to that extent. So any questions on any of those designs? No?
The multiple greenhouse, do you have problem with like snow off from the roof or?
There's
what's the mechanism?
several methods of removing snow from the valleys. Some growers will do gutter heat, which is coming off a boiler system inside the greenhouse, and they'll run a line, and it could be fin tube heating, which is basically a water line with aluminum fins, square fins that circumvent it, that run. So if an impending storm comes, they crank the heat up in the gutter. So as the snow comes down, it's melting, it's running to the downspouts. That's the expensive method. Others, they go down through and they'll clear it out. Or simply crank the heat up in their greenhouses. And it's basically, you're just obviously losing money at that point because you now have turned your heat up to 80 degrees just to keep that snow melting. But it's by much less expensive to do that than to replace your greenhouse. So if you have a greenhouse, have it insured for collapse.
The other thing I can see sometimes, like with the electrical, a lot of the greenhouses, they drip condensation, they rust out the light fixtures pretty quickly.
Yeah. GFI is by code. You never want to use PVC in a greenhouse because it's obviously the sun you're getting in there is ultraviolet. So a lot of PVC is not UV protected. So what happens with PVC is in a short period of time it becomes brittle and fails. So the preferred product that we use in greenhouses will either be galvanized piping or stainless steel.
That's very expensive.
Stainless steel gets very expensive. But it's a one-time because galvanized will sometimes rust. But GFI, outlets and liquid tight connections, and the plumbing, is copper, so there's no worries with that. So the simplest form of glazing a greenhouse, depending on the style, of course, your freestanding aluminum won't take plastic because edges are sharp, but your domes, your closets, your hoops, the gutter connects, typically will have the 6 mil polyethylene and air inflated. So what they'll do, like on the one on the left, is they'll do 2 layers of 6 mil poly, and then they introduce a small squirrel cage fan air inflation unit and penetrate the first layer, plug it into a 110 outlet, and it will puff up between the 2 layers. So it's creating that air space, and it's dual purpose really. It's adding insulation to the greenhouse. So it's pushing out, but it's also pushing in. So it's pushing in on every 4-foot rib. So when that happens, it's like your rib cage. Once you're expanded, it becomes more structurally integrated. A big wind, in other words, if you've got 50, 60 mile an hour wind forecasted, a big storm coming through, a person will go out there and take their air inflation kit and crank it wide open. And that just makes that skin drum hard and boing, boing, boing on it. So that you now minimize the movement, although there's still going to be a little bit, but you won't start to sway. Because if you get a hole in your plastic in a big wind, then of course you've got a greenhouse that wants to do this, and it will. But all the posts for greenhouses are driven in anywhere from 24, 36 to 48, depending on what size and how tall you're going with the sidewalls on a greenhouse. Some people will buy the extended height. They want to be able to walk down the side of the greenhouse, where I noted 3 feet, they might want 6. So we go with the ground posts that are extra tall outside, so they have to go extra deep inside in the ground. Sometimes we'll do concrete in all 4 corners of a greenhouse post and 1 in the center. And that just adds to the integrity.
I'll just add with the double inflated squirrel cage fans, you know, they do make your plastic last a lot longer because it's rigid and it's not as worn. And unfortunately, what we've learned as we started to do like measuring like light meters inside is that even you know, because the plastic unfortunately only lasts a few years. And people who were inflating it were saying, oh, well, I can get like 7, 8, 10 years because I'm not wearing out. But what happens is the plastic becomes increasingly opaque, and especially for folks like doing winter production, it's really noticeable. And then that's the other thing I'll add with the double inflated is normally the 2 layers are going down and they're ending here, and then there's a single layer here, which is where your roll up and where your roll up sides are. So you can roll this right up to here and, you know, have free moving air. What we've done in our greenhouse and Joe Bewley's done is he and I will inflate right to the baseboard at the bottom, which really limits your ability to vent in the summer, but gives you that much more insulation in the winter. So it's, again, it's a cost-benefit compromise as to whether you're more oriented towards winter production or more oriented towards summer production. And to compensate for that, Joe has done the raised sidewalls just to get the hot air that much higher above his plants. And then Joe and I both use what are called butterfly vents, which are like in the gable ridge, you know, so that the very peak of the greenhouse is ventilated where the hottest air is. So just figured I'd add that. I also found a copy of the Winter Harvest Handbook. If anybody wants to check it out, this is the bookstore's copy, so maybe you could make sure it goes back there, or somebody wants to buy it, but check out the pictures in that. And yeah.
One other,
Sorry to interrupt. That's all right.
just that, also with the side vent system, some people will do what they do a jump pit, so they'll do the double layer to the ground, and they jump the air from here to there. So they can blow up their side vent when they want in the winter and leave it so that they can roll it up. Roll up vent is basically, you get outside and you crank it up, and it rolls the full length of the vent of the greenhouse and up 3 to 4 feet, however you want it. So that lets all that cool air right from the bottom for cross ventilation, or obviously it's rising, so as Keith was talking about, as far as the ventilation up top here, typically thermostatically controlled so that when it gets that warm, one end has the louver, the other end has an exhaust fan, so it forces. And some of them just use convection. I don't know if that, you just use an actual convection with these.
Yeah, like the whole gable ridge, the whole gable wall opens, you know, just manually.
Yeah. But they'll make like a louver system automatic, so one end's just the louver, the other end is an exhaust fan, and that's going to pull the air across the ceiling with these vents open or closed, either way.
What would you do if you were to put a greenhouse on like a flat roof as far as foundation, securing it, wind, that kind of thing?
I built some in Rhode Island on top of a roof this past year. He had 3 existing. I'd never quite seen a roof system like this. He was growing mushrooms, and he had 3 previous greenhouses, and his whole roof system was concrete. So he basically just bored into the concrete for his 2-inch pipe frame and epoxied them into the roof system. But when I got the inspector up there, because he was adding 2 more greenhouses, and if you could picture every 4 feet, 96 feet times 2 times his 3 greenhouses, and you've got, in my opinion, a piece of Swiss cheese up there. He's got so many holes drilled. By adding 2 more greenhouses with that many more holes, I'm wondering what's it doing to the integrity in a heavy snow. So I had, and he wasn't happy with it, but I had an inspector come up there and he said no more holes. So we basically plated the bottom of the greenhouse post with 4x4 plates and 4 small fasteners that we just drilled small holes into the concrete, didn't penetrate completely through, and that worked well, you know. And actually saved him some money because it was expensive to get boring machines up there and a lot of time to do that many holes. So you definitely want, these have to be mounted. I mean, they can't, because they will blow away. I've never seen one blow away, none that I've built, but, you know, if you picture, like the Rolling Thunder, Keith says, you know, it's as in, the function's great, you know how it functions, but you have to secure that down to the ground. Just think of it, it's this big 42 by 100 foot piece of plastic, you know? And if the winds get underneath the track system, which properly buried, you know, because there's feather or tailings of plastic that I assume you cover.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that keeps rodents out, because mice love plastic. So, if you buy a roll of polyethylene and you plan on using it in a couple of months, make sure you store it properly because they'll chew right. And all you need is 1 hole in the center of it, and you've got 100 holes through the layers. Like if you picture, if you puncture the side of a roll of toilet paper, you've got a lot of holes all through it as you roll it out. So keeping the greenhouse anchored is quite important. Any other questions to this point?
Hey, don't forget that everybody gets a t-shirt tomorrow.
Oh, really?
Yes, including you.
Is that new this year?
No? No, you should.
I should have 3 t-shirts then.
Yeah, you should. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, folks. I
Okay,
will
thanks.
stay in touch, please.
Say hi to Corey.
I will. Good to see you.
Good seeing you. Some of these greenhouses, they'll do what we call, and a lot of you may know, is the knee wall. And that's basically, typically it's 30 inches above grade. It can be concrete, it can be wood, stone. A lot of reasons for in a more of a residential and a retail is to keep the cold air off your plants, because the plant bench, interior plant bench, will be roughly 30 inches also. So if you're insulated from the cold, the snow, from the out of doors, from the cold air getting to your root system. So picture if you have a plant bench that's drawn and plastic down to the ground in the wintertime, regardless of how well that plastic is buttoned down to the earth. And typically we'll use sand or dirt or whatever just to cover that plastic laying out to seal the air. You're still getting that cold air transmittance. So your plant roots, as they chill, slow the growth. So heating your soil, that Keith touched bases on a little bit, is the best method, because you can keep your greenhouse temperature. I keep mine at 50 degrees in the wintertime, before my heat kicks on. But I've got heat coils in my plant beds, so for my lettuces and my carrots and all that. So, and I keep that only at about 60, 65, and it varies a little bit. But my roots are happy, the plants are growing, and I'm not spending a lot of money in fuel in the wintertime. So the knee wall helps protect basically the root system of the plants. There's some rain.
Sorry, how high is the knee wall usually?
30 inches typically, and that's gauged around the typical door height. And that's why they keep it at 30 inches. It's more like just a standard, industry standard height. You can go higher, but it's designed just to be the same level as your plant bench. So a lot of people, you know, for inexpensive plant benches, people give away oak pallets, and cinder blocks are a dime a dozen. It's a perfect vessel to use. I built custom plant benches, you know, out of clear heart redwood for people who in their home, they just want a beautiful plant bench system, but it's immediately covered with plants, so you really don't enjoy the beauty of it over the hall. They look great when they're brand new because they don't have any plants on them, but you give the people what they want. So, and there's bench systems that have like a mesh on the top. It's called expanded metal. Quite inexpensive. They're just metal bench tops. They come in a sheet, and it allows your dirt and your water and everything to go down through the plant bench onto the ground. So you're not pulling everything up on your plant bench as far as dirt and water is concerned. And they make plastic ones.
Big mesh.
Yeah, what it is it comes out a sheet of steel, 1/8 inch thick, and it's punched into a diamond shape, and then they expand it. And that
Yeah, I'd
opens
say
it all
we
up.
use it's just a grid mesh.
You use a grid, yeah, like a enhanced chicken wire.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you can use. But you want to have it sturdy, because your plants get heavy. So some of the coverings, let's talk about coverings. 6 mil we've gone over. There's, and I'll pass these around so you guys can put your hands on them. There's a couple of products here. So the corrugated, you can see it's very, very thin. This is actually 2 different products. One is, and it's all about UV, or light transmission. So this one is at 62%, and this one's at 50.5, 90.5, sorry. And this one here, the 90.5 has, there's a texture to it. And that diffuses the light just a little bit more. This one here is actually clear. Indestructible stuff. This is the coax.
So that one in your left hand transmits more light
Less.
than the one in your right?
90.5 and 92.
Oh,
Yeah. So these corrugations you're somewhat limited to that. All of these you're limited to how it's used, only because of the bending radius. You might not get the bend out of this over a long or a short radius, so you want to be careful with that. But it's,
Is that still called polycarbonate?
excuse me,
Is that polycarbonate, or is that the,
this is coax.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's a different material.
It's right. It is a polycarbonate-based product,
Okay.
but you wouldn't be calling it a polycarbonate.
Okay.
Just all your polycarbonates are basically this next group. So there's clears, there's bronze. Oh, there we go. So it's getting dark in here. Opal, and then this one here is a heat shield. They're doing this in some of the windshields, but the big issue is when they're introducing this product into windshields is that it cuts your GPS signal out. So this is to keep the heat down inside. So this could be used in retail, maybe on their sidewalls.
well, that's to keep heat out.
It allows light in, but keeps the heat out. This actually has 4 layers in the honeycomb system, which you'll see when I pass it around.
Would it also keep heat in if you were heating your greenhouse in the winter?
Not any more than the rest of them. It's mainly designed to keep the heat out.
So it's only on one, it's like one
It's coated
side?
on one side, so it'd be important to make sure you have the right side out. And a case in point, I bid a job 2 years ago in Brattleboro, 12,000 square feet. The builder who won the project had built 2 greenhouses. At that point, I'd built 314, but we were $3,000 different. So the owner went with the money saver. All of the material he put in upside down, and within 2 years, it all failed. So guess who's going back to replace it at pretty much the same cost as the bid? That's my job.
Wait, you were $3,000 more for a 12,000 square foot?
Yeah.
So 30 cents more per
Yeah.
square.
And now he's going to spend $60,000 to have me go back and take all of the old stuff out, put all the new stuff in. And he called me. So
Which one is the coax or the polycarbonate is cheaper?
they all range. Well, the cheapest is going to be just your clear. Well, that's a no drip, so that's not. Just plain clear.
Okay,
Twin walled. This ranges roughly $2 a square foot.
okay.
Typically, it can come into a sheet 4 foot to 6 foot wide and up to 39 feet long. You can have it, if you have designed a specific greenhouse and you know that you're 8 feet from the peak to the eave, you can make a call, or 8 foot 2 inches, you can make a call, and we say we want an 8.2, and they'll pre-cut it in the factory, which is a big savings for us, for the builders and for the homeowner, because you take if you have to cut it, which some people prefer, take a paneling blade, turn it backwards on your skill saw, eye protection, ear protection, and just cut. And then you have to vacuum the cells out of all the filings. It's static electricity just naturally happens when you're running the saw against it, and the filings want to suck up into the panel. So we either blow it out or vacuum it out. You don't really want to leave them in there because it cuts down on your light. So that's right around the $2 range, and then this stuff will go up to the $4 range. The 4-walled, adding, obviously, who would know the difference between twin and 4 as far as, is this energy savings? Let's say this was clear 4-walled versus just double-walled. What's the benefit of going with 4-walled versus 2, in other words?
More insulation.
Exactly, more insulation. And what you want to do in order to make this an insulated unit is, and we'll get into these extrusions later on, is the bottom is capped and the top is taped with a foil tape. We use a foil tape. So you've captured all the cells so that in the wintertime, it's a sealed unit. So your energy savings double almost if you don't use the proper sealing. If you don't use the sealing on the top, all your air is just moving through it. Versus sealed on the top, you're capturing the hot air, warmer air. Again, bronze retail keeps you nice and cool. Some people will do this on the west wall for the setting sun, but it's mainly going to be a retail product, and it just cools your house down. Opal, this more goes towards retail also, but it adds light in. It's still a growing product, meaning it will still allow proper growth, but it's more of a diffused light than the clear, obviously. A lot of people use this in their side walls. It still allows light in. People use this more for privacy. I mean, you can't see the lettering of a book through this, but you know, if you've got your light on at night and you're in your greenhouse, and you don't want to be there in the buff talking to your plants, this is a little sketchy where this one here allows you to do that at will. Not that I've ever tried that, because I have a glass house.
Yeah, showering.
Yes. So I'll just pass these around. You guys can get a feel for them. Very lightweight, virtually indestructible. We walk across that. You can drill it for like flues, heat flues. You can bend up to a 13-degree radius on some of the curved greenhouses. You will use, obviously, all the water sheds. This is about a 3/8 to a 1/2 inch lap. In the winter, these frost shut at night, so the units are sealed. In the morning, this melts, and the frost from this light goes out to the top of this one, and this one, and this one, so you're not getting all the drips from the glass, from the frost. So when I was throwing the snow and having a great time, all these little stones were coming in right at the edge, right at the edge. And because that edge is exposed, the lights were shattering. In an insulated greenhouse, sunroom, the system is all contained. This being glass, this being a cap, little gap in between, the next light, gap in between the cap, bar base, bar cap. And so when you look at that greenhouse or the sunroom from this perspective of the roof, you get that type of vision. It's all aluminum, aluminum, aluminum. Where in glass, it'd be aluminum, 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 glass, 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 glass.
And if you looked at the single pane, flat
greenhouses. Horticultural, depending on the product, the model, or the company, they'll go 30 inches, and some will go 36 inches, and when they do that, they'll introduce what we call a cane. Basically, the cane just looks like this underneath that fits the frame, and then that piece of glass goes into that. And then the next piece of glass starts on that. And that cane is aluminum, and that's just added structural integrity so it doesn't belly up like that. Old English, this is like from the first greenhouses where glass was introduced, black glass. I did a job, they're waiting for funding, where the panes are 11 inches across. So these rafters are just 11 inches on center. And the gentleman, it's a restoration project, was trying to convince me that it was authentic Lord and Burnham, but I know better. I know better because I'm looking at purchasing Lord and Burnham. And so I know the history of it. It's Lord and Burnham bows, Lord and Burnham materials, but somebody 60 years ago scratch built a greenhouse out of those parts. Maybe they had some 11-inch glass kicking around the farm or whatever, and that's what they used. That's a lot of little whites of glass. And when you do that, you picture a bow, which is this thick, every 11 inches. Imagine the shade you're getting in that greenhouse, short of direct sunlight. So in his winter, when we're showing the sun coming around across the face of this greenhouse, that thing's practically shaded until that sun gets really far and facing it. But that's what the architects want, so. Why don't we take a small break, drinks, bathroom break, and we'll reconvene 15 minutes or so. Is that all right? Any other questions before?
Insulated glass is for sunroofs.
Typically. There are greenhouse manufacturers that make insulated glass greenhouses.
And then greenhouse is on
Horticultural, what we term as true horticultural is single pane glass.
single family.
Yeah. The reasons Lord and Burnham sells a greenhouse that has insulated glass, but because of you're adding double the weight, you're doubling the cost of the glass, you're increasing the structure because of integrity with the weight. So you basically price yourself out for a greenhouse that's going to lose almost as much heat as a single tank greenhouse. It's just not the intention. If you're going to go to that point, get a sunroof because they're designed for greenhouses. You're doing a roof, you're doing the sides, you're doing the gable, wherever you have a panel, meet panel, that's the application for that. Okay?
If you were buying like lengths of that, does it come in like?
This
8
comes in
foot
12-foot lengths.
12 foot?
Yeah. All of the
And that's all in
aluminum.
the catalog that you talked about?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, the Griffin Greenhouse catalog, like I was saying, they'll send a catalog to you. Milikowski, there's a number of catalogs out there. They all pretty much have everything. And they're all very similar. All made by the same manufacturer. Everybody's got their hand in the pot, per se. The greenhouse, these are two options that they were choosing from. They used the clear in the roof. This is a no drip 16 millimeter. So yesterday we were comparing the differences in the 8 versus the 6. So 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. This is called the D glass. It's the newest in the products as far as the polycarbonates are concerned. This is hail resistant, more so. It's still very brittle. It will crack if you walk upon it or if you drop a hammer on it or a tool type of thing. So basically there's a film that covers, it's not this film, but it looks like this film, that covers the panel inside and out. On the inside, there's a whole, not necessarily history of the panel, but how it's to be used, that you can't drill into it. You shouldn't walk on it. It's not fire resistant. And it will also give you, on the edge, it's etched right into the panel itself. It will say no drip side. And the reason why they don't put it on the instructions, which most people, first-time installers, would go, I didn't know that this was supposed to go outside, because all polycarbonates versus the coax materials, which gets a little confusing for, again, first-time users. If you buy a piece of polycarbonate and it has two protective sheets on it, one side will give you instructions for application, installation. That is the side that goes to the out of doors. The coax, all the writing, all the installation applications, that writing means it goes on the inside. And the reason they do that is because they'll etch the edges with no drip side. And that gives the customer, it's not, these products are not only used in greenhouses, they might be used for a cow barn to let light in. So they'll put the no drip side to the outside because it stays cleaner. They're not worried about drips coming inside, but they're worried or concerned about it getting dirty. And that's just for whatever reason. All horticulturalists will put the no drip on the inside because they do not want condensation dripping onto their potted plants, their seedlings. Now, if they don't do seeds, if they retail and they're just basically retailing plants, they'll probably put the no drip on the outside just to keep it cleaner so they don't have to power wash it once a year. And it's kind of like, if any of you guys use the Rain-X in your windshield washer fluids, it's a great product. And basically, the water just beads on your windshield as you're driving down the road and just flutters off. So you're not using your wipers as often. I think it works great. So 16 mil opal, again, retail, sidewalls, a little shading, factor. It's more comfortable. And then this for growing purposes.
Are you saying they power wash with Rain-X?
No, but if
It's
it's
like
similar to like a Rain-X, so it just continues to wash off. It beads and runs versus streaking. These are, sorry, yeah.
So I thought that you said that polycarbonate was virtually indestructible.
Yes.
But
Coax is not.
oh, that's not polycarbonate. Okay.
No.
Okay.
Coax is brittle. And
Okay.
you can, although this is 16 mil and the other is 8 mil, you can do this with the 8 mil, even if and 16. If this were polycarbonate and 16, I could flex it. But I'll pass these around so you guys can get a feel for
So
that.
it's less expensive than.
That's more expensive.
It's more-
That's the top of the line stuff. This very tight with their money, understandably so, and it becomes it's very difficult building for a farmer. They are the most difficult individuals to build with for whatever reason. So anyhow, or a number of reasons. Cow Farms retail uses the opal as far as the 6 mil is concerned. Growing greenhouses, the clear, you can see it's clear, but it's also diffused. You do 2 layers, and then you do this and this. You can clearly see how that increases as far as the diffusion is concerned. They also sell, sometimes this stuff will tear a branch, a kid poking a stick through it, and they sell a poly tape that actually, and it comes in different widths and different lengths, that you can use to fix your tear. And it's made of the same material, but they apply an adhesive to it. So it will expand and contract with the poly. So it's not like taking Scotch tape, in other words, and plugging a hole because it won't last. We did a job in Saranac Lake, New York, a few years back, and they had a snowstorm. It was for mentally challenged individuals. The greenhouses were for, so they would grow their plants and just therapy to get them out there. The snow was coming down, and one of the students went in with a 2x4 from the inside to get the snow off the roof and poked the 2x4 through both layers of plastic every 4 feet. Down one greenhouse, walked out of that greenhouse, went into the next greenhouse, because he thought he was doing a good deed. And the greenhouses ended up collapsing overnight because the air inflation obviously was no longer available. The snow built up, everything collapsed, lost all their plants, their heaters, their coolers, everything, just devastated.
That could be dangerous if somebody was in there.
It's a pretty slow process. I've watched it happen before. The collapse. watched it collapse before.
What can you
It
do
just
about
got to the point the customer called and said, I've got some concerns with my greenhouse. I said, plow the sides, plow the sides. Can't get the truck started. I need some advice. I went there. It was just stressed, and you could hear it just wanting to give. So there was nothing I could do at the time, at that point. So we just sat back and took pictures for the insurance company. Farmers insurance, that's the insurance you want if you own a greenhouse, because they will cover almost everything. However, their restrictions are you must have a heat source. If you do not have a heat source, you must have a winter support kit. So if you have neither of those, then your claim won't be valid. And the last thing I dug out were some wood cypress samples that over the years on some of I've restored 9 antique greenhouses. 4 of these samples are from 4 different greenhouses, and the age of the wood itself ranged from 74 years to 124 years old. That's when I took the greenhouse down. Meaning when I took the greenhouse down, or when they fabricated the greenhouse, that's how old the wood was. When they milled the greenhouse, it could be up to 150 to 175 years beyond this date. So this 124-year-old piece of cypress or fabricated cypress could actually be 300 years old. So, and that's the fascinating thing about the cypress. So I'll pass these around, and I counted the rings. And if you've got some water, some liquid, if you wet the ends of it, or you can lick it, I don't care. I'm not going to tell you if I have or not. The rings really enhance, and it's amazing if you take the 74-year-old and the 124-year-old, you can just see the stark difference in the rings. You can see, I've magnified them. I've got a whole setup where I'll check out the rings, and you can see slow growth years, fire. Hoop houses, you'll see hoop houses that have a 42 feet by 100-foot piece of shaped fabric. People do it for over their tomatoes. But a lot of growers there's a lot of growers that also retail. So for instance, they're doing tomatoes, you can walk into their 100-foot greenhouse and pick their tomatoes, off their vines. And they'll shade it during the day because they want the customer to stay in there and pick bushels versus a pound. So and they go on, large commercial, far glass houses are concerned. It's a very inexpensive way to shade your greenhouse. But that's all it does is shade. The other systems that do this, and I could pass this around, these are fabrics. These are more for conservatories, and I'll show you the application of these. Top dollar. Sometimes some of these fabrics go $25 a square foot just for the fabric. It's common. If a person spends $100,000 on a greenhouse, they will spend $35,000 to $45,000 on an interior fabricated shade system.
And it covers the entire inside? Or
What it
just
do-
like certain plants?
You can do that. You can buy it so it's just location, location, location. Like if you've got orchids in one corner of your greenhouse that need shading versus all the other plants that you're playing with, then you just shade that corner. It could be from the outside, can be from the inside. So hoop house, exterior shade fabric just goes, this is the mesh. Okay. Freestanding rigid frame. Reference rigid frame means aluminum and glass. 2 different styles of shade system. Conservatory style, and there's always going to be a couple of vents up the top. So, and even in hoop houses, they can have vents. So that complicates things a little bit as far as the shading is concerned, because you either shade to the bottom or you shade completely up and over with your vents open. You very seldom will open your vents with your shade system on. There's just too much resistance. So we do also apply simple shade systems just to the vents alone, and the customer will just leave them there 24/7, 365 days a year. They just put them on, or we just put them on, and they're there. Then they'll shade from here below and take it off seasonally. So interior shade system, the fancy stuff, will come and just do this per bay. So each and every bay, it starts from the bottom and rolls up. Interior shading, fancy style. Interior shading, commercial, light commercial, is this stuff. Different fabrics, more shade, less shade. This is a dual purpose, as well as this. People get this, because you can add layers to this, it'll be just a simple shade, or it will also be a heat retention blanket. So it's keeping the heat in, and it's keeping the sun out. Not as much sun out because the sun comes through the glass first before it hits the shade system. But more importantly, people are buying the dual purpose heat retention and shade systems just for that fact, for this, is to keep the heat in the wintertime. So this is going to be, as the crow flies, this is the ridge. 10 or 12-foot bay spacing on your rigid greenhouses. So that shiny stuff, I'll call it for now, goes bay to bay. Each and every bay has a full-length curtain across it. So like if this were a greenhouse inside and these were the bays, that shade system would go from post to post, post to post, and they all move at the same time. So the thermostat kicks on, or the timer kicks on, and everything just, the whole system closes at the same time, but they're all individually run. There's two, I'm just going to start getting rid of these when they go dry. My son used to lick the ends of them when he was a kid, thinking that that would make them last longer. Not really. So there's two systems. Typically there's a truss in this type of house, the W truss. They do what they call a slope, flat, slope system. Slope, flat across, and slope down. This gives the grower more headroom, because this typically runs between 8 and 10 or 12 feet to the gutter height. So if they want more room in there for growing plants that are tall, tomatoes, peas, any type of a vine product, they'll do the slope, flat slope. They're trapping all the heat up into the ridge at night. The heaters are always below the shade system. And then the other system is a simple flat. Goes right across the bottom of the truss cord. A little bit less money for the flat. All automatic. Those systems do not come in a manual scenario setup. So fire resistant, and it differs in how much intensity of the fire resistance you want. There's a lot of data that goes along with this. It's a lot of technical information, but you can see the differences in the weaves, and it kind of gives you the differences in the coefficiency of them.
What's the range of cost for that?
That runs, that's less expensive than this. That can run someplace around in between $15 and $22, $23 a square foot.
Not that much cheaper than, didn't you say that was like 25?
This runs even higher, 25 for the basic.
Oh, okay.
And it goes up immediately with that. But I get a lot of people who want this, so, because it's pretty, you know, it really dresses up your greenhouse. but you'll never see this in commercial applications. The other form of whitewash, as far as, and only to be applied, although I've seen it done on clear polyethylene, is what they call whitewash. And that's basically just what it is, it's whitewash.
We do that on our cold frames.
Yeah.
For propagation.
Yeah. And the beauty of that, which works sometimes a little bit most of the time, is once you apply it, you paint it on, spray it on, and then the first frost is supposed to bring it off the greenhouse glass, off the glass. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. However, it attaches to everything else also. You know, your framing, anything you spray it on. So it becomes more of an aesthetic, an appeal versus a function, but it's very inexpensive to do. And people who are just growers will do that, will do their whitewash. You know, they don't care about aesthetics whatsoever. They're just thinking about the profit, so, which is fine.
It does seem to leave a little bit of a film.
It does,
Even when it comes off.
even when it comes off. And then they'll apply it the next year, and then it leaves a little bit more of a film. So when people buy whitewash from me or ask me to apply it, I try to convince them to allow me to come back in the fall and power wash their greenhouse, you know, give it a scrubbing, because that's when you're gonna want your best light in the wintertime. And if you're getting just some of the whitewash off of it and it's leaving that film, well then you've lost a bunch of your transmission, your light transmission, so. But typically the people who, again, buy that, they're not thinking about that. They don't wanna spend the money. Every greenhouse I sell, I attempt to sell a service contract. These are all investments. You know, people are spending tens of thousands of dollars on a greenhouse. So depending on the size, you know, I'll charge $750 to, my biggest one is $22,000 for annual service. And I have 54 annual service contracts, which that's my winter. I choose not to build greenhouses in the cold, in the dead of winter. So instead I'm doing the Northeast tour and doing just service. And I'll be gone for 2 weeks and then I come home for a couple weeks or a week and just do it that way, just do service in the wintertime. And almost all, whether it's the small mom and pop or the big commercial, buy service contracts. Because, and if they don't initially, the very first time they call me with an issue, out of warranty issue, glass breakage, or one of their motors is seized up because somebody, one of the vines got caught up into the tracking system or something like that from their plants. Expensive on emergency calls, you know, to go to Mass, to go to Rhode Island at a drop of a hat. I have to charge premium dollar for that. Then they buy the service contract.
So in order for you're based in Vermont, right? So in order for your business to thrive, or you often have to build like all over the Northeast. So are you traveling like 50% of the time, or like how often are you not?
This summer is the first summer in 16, 17 years that I've been home. All summer.
Yeah.
And that's just because I'm working a job 12 minutes down. That's this job here, which I'll show you guys the plans for.
So you'll be like on a job for like weeks at a time or something?
You know, because I'm so accustomed to traveling, I don't work weekends. There are some projects where it makes sense if, you know, like Bar Harbor, which is 8-hour drive. If it's a 2-week project or 7-day project, well, I work through the weekend because that just makes sense. I've got a 3-month project coming up in New Island. It's called New Haven off of Maine. You familiar with that, Robert? New Haven, the island New Haven?
Not North Haven?
North Haven? Yeah, North Haven.
Yeah.
I've been to Vinyl Haven.
Excuse me?
Vinyl Haven.
It's right next to them.
Is it?
It's out there.
There's 3 35 by 100 foot greenhouses that I'm building there. And they're all 8 mil polycarbonate covered. They're pipe frame steel, pipe frame gutter connect. 8 mil, 6 feet wide. And this is the worst stuff to install, 6 foot wide, because you can't get your arms around it. So each panel is a two-man project, where if it's 4 feet, it's a one-man project. So I increased, obviously, labor. You have to use lifts because you're going up separately. So there's a lot of additional things to consider when you're using 6-foot panels. Yeah, it covers more with less aluminum. So you're spending less on your aluminum end, but the owner ends up spending more on labor.
Yeah.
So, in that particular job, I'll work 2 weeks and I'll be home 4 days, and I'll work 2 weeks, because the guys like to get home every once in a while. See, my kids are grown and gone. And in my younger days, I would travel. The reason why I was putting 100,000 miles on in my younger days is because I would drive home for plays and for birthdays and anniversaries and family stuff, whether if I was in Buffalo or whatever. And that was just what I chose to do. Now I don't need to do that. My wife is, we've been married 30 years, and if we miss the anniversary by a day, no big deal. The kids are off and gone, so I don't mind traveling. I enjoy it even more. And Lori will come with me sometimes in the summer. So, but the guys that work with me have young families. They're just making the dollar. I'm not only making the dollar, but I'm making the profit. So I treat them right. I mean, lodging, meals, they get everything when they travel. And we don't stay Motel 6s or anything like that, but we also don't do 5-star Hiltons. But I treat them.
But for the most part, a greenhouse business has to be pretty.
You're traveling. Yeah. You're traveling. If you're like had I done this years ago, in retrospect, like buy a house in Connecticut, Hartford area, bought a home in Boston, Mass. That's a hub. There's a ton of greenhouse, so you can.
In the city, in Boston?
Not in the city, but just the outlying areas. So there's a lot of greenhouse work that goes on. I've spent 80% of my time in Connecticut and Massachusetts, in those areas.
Didn't you say you don't leave the state unless it's a job over $100,000?
Yeah. It's just it's where I'm at in my career.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm just thinking like if you spend 80% of your time there, then
Must be a lot of.
yeah, then those are really expensive.
It's a great business. It's a good business. But it's a service business. It's not something that you can, to sell it, there's really not a lot to sell other than my equipment. It's my knowledge that I would have to be selling. And the only way that you could sell that is to really go to work for the person who buys it and be their lead guy. I do that now. So that was the only thing that I wish I could find something different in this business, which is why I'm thinking about buying a greenhouse company, Lord & Burnham, looking into purchasing that, so that in 15 years I have something that I can sell versus just the installations. And I'll still keep my installation crews going, but I'll own and operate the fabrication end of it, which is exciting because I've got some changes to make.
Oh, I thought you were talking about purchasing like a Lord & Burnham greenhouse, but you're thinking about purchasing the company.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
We're in the paper process of that right now, negotiations. So hopefully by this time next year that will have come to fruition. It's a long process. I'm busy, he's busy. He's busy fabricating, I'm busy building, so it's tough for us to slow down enough to go that route. And I'll move the company. My wife wants to retire down in the Carolinas. So the company is not necessarily geographically grounded. So I'll move it to North Carolina, we'll own a home down there, and I'll keep the house up here. She wants North Carolina, I want Vermont.
So what are the greenhouse situations in other parts of the country? Not even business-wise, but like, are there climates that are bad for greenhouses, or just making more tropical plants if you're?
Yeah, it's just the difference of what you're growing. I mean, you won't see you'll see a different style of structure, like in Arizona or more of the desert areas. Then basically what they'll be is shade cloth. You guys ever seen what they call the Florida room? And it's like just a big screen room. It looks like a greenhouse frame, but it's just screen. And all down in Florida, every townhouse, every condo practically has them attached over their little pool area or the patio or whatever. And so they basically take a greenhouse structure in those locations and just do shade cloth because they don't need the intensity, the glass, to intensify heat. They're not worried so much about the cold at night, in those areas where temperate, and so that's the same structure, but it's just covered in shade cloth, which is interesting.
And that's for not only just like patios, but for growing plants in the South, they'll need shade instead of sun.
Right. Yeah, because the shade's intense, I mean, right now, Lord Burnham, he says he has 22 dealer reps, which is, I'm one of them. I think there should be double that, because they're all like central and east. He's got one in California, one up in Washington, and those states are prime for Oregon. That's prime for greenhouses. It'd be beautiful there. So.
Do you find that most of the companies that you're in competition with for bids are general contractors, or are they specialized like you are in building greenhouses?
It's funny, most of them are, well, there are farmers who farm and then build greenhouses. They're some of my competitors. There are builders of stick building that have worked their way into greenhouses. There's solarium companies that will build horticultural. But there's
What's the difference between
the solarium is no drips, no moisture, no air infiltration. It's a living space. You put the TV and the recliner out there and carpeted sunroom, solarium.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's 5 known exclusive horticultural builders in the Northeast and Central U.S. So my competition is a long ways away. So that's why I keep busy in the Northeast, this little corner here, because for somebody to come from Illinois, they're obviously charging all that travel to come, so their price goes up. Any other thoughts on shading?
Where's this company from? Sweden?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a certain region of the world where a lot of greenhouse supplies come from? I feel like irrigation comes a lot from Israel. They kind of perfected that.
Because the Dutch, that area in Europe, I mean, you go there and 5 acres is a small thing for greenhouses.
So that was huge.
There's
Cover shot.
100 acres greenhouses out there, covering 100 acres of ground. And they're massive. And there's some in the Connecticut area where they're hoop houses, more of the Quonset style that I showed you yesterday, that you look out into a field of 20, 25 acres and that's all you see is hoop, all white, right straight through. It's amazing to see that. Imagine the plastic alone to cover those is just incredible. So, and I've been in some mega houses, and the production, it's a business, and it's serious business. They've got tracking systems that go down in between all of the plant benches, so that the handlers are picking, and they're all automated, they're remote controlled, they're pressing a button to track, the trolley runs, they go into production, the seeding, they're pouring bags of seed into a hopper type of thing, and it's shaking out, and this machine is just spitting out plate after plate after plate of little pop seeded, ready for production, right into the system, right onto the benches, right through the watering, and it's business, it's a huge business. And you gotta be right on top of it. So, but there's nothing like being in your greenhouse and just playing with your plants, the small stuff, which is what I enjoy. So, But like I say, any size greenhouse is you can get. So, want to talk about some irrigation, watering methods. There's the old-fashioned way, which I enjoy, and that's wanding. I think that allows you to remain intimate with your plants. You see what's going on, you know, if you've got some aphids happening or some molds going on or the soil is being saturated, you know, all that kind of stuff you can just monitor. A lot of garden centers, that's the rule of thumb. They retail. They'll go through and they wand in the morning, they'll wand at night. And that's just the norm. Another method is, which I also have, the system is a misting system. And I use that for when we travel, so that my plants can stay hydrated. So, misting systems. You got your plant bench. And on the plant bench, there's a control station and what I call a fly swatter. It's hooked to water. This little kit here comes with solenoids. You hook your water to it, right off the hose bib, solenoid, 110 power, PVC piping. These are brass spouts that you buy a kit. It's $126. You get the whole pod system and you get like 12 brass nozzles. You go to the hardware store and you get yourself some PVC, and this can run, you know, you can have bench, bench, bench. This is my configuration of my greenhouse. The 3 benches. In my misting system, these are all the pods. Do this. This is my control station. So you hook power to it, you hook water to it. You got your plants down there, obviously. And this fly swatter, when it's in the up mode, if there's a weight in the back, I'm going to exaggerate this, there's a weight. You adjust this weight to keep the fly swatter moving in the amount of water you want. So as the mist comes off, and it's a very fine mist, it's misty, it's not like a shower. So the mist is coming off, and it's a plume. It soaks, the closest one to this fly swatter will soak the fly swatter, and as it gets heavy with water, click, and it shuts the system off. The sun comes out, the fly swatter starts to dry off, click, it comes back on. You can adjust this weight to water more or less. You can get a click, or it can run for 2 minutes. It all depends on what you're growing, you know, how much you want to water it. It's a do-it-yourself type of kit. All you do is drill a hole in the inch PVC, and you screw the brass fitting into it, depending on if you're well water or city water, meaning if you have hard water, then that little pinhole, because basically what this is into the PVC, there's a little, so the water shoots up and it hits this little flat spot on the brass, shoots up, and that's what makes it mist. So it hits that, and then it forms an umbrella of the mist. So this little hole will just plug up with, it can be just, if you don't blow out the PVC really well, clean it all out, once you've drilled through it, then immediately it's going to plug with a piece of the tailings. So you unscrew it, you know, blow it out, or stick a little needle in there and screw it back down onto it. And I use this when we travel. Because we tried to house sitter one time and ended up flooding my 8 foot of gravel with a broken water pipe because the heat went down and pipes broke in the greenhouse and it flooded my greenhouse and office because he wasn't there doing what he should have been doing. So that's when I bought the misting system and an alarm system for the heater if the heat goes down. Very simple. I don't see any cons about it because it's so user-friendly. You can adjust it to any length of time you want to water your plants.
Do you see cons to the wanding?
Excuse me?
Do you see cons to the wanding system?
I don't. No. It's just that you have to be there to do it. You know, if you miss a day, you know, you're going to wonder if you don't have a shade system. Geez, if I didn't close the shade system, it's going to be sunny and I didn't get a chance to water this morning. Man, those guys are going to be thirsty by the time I get home. And this also can be, I guess probably one of the cons to this is if you don't have a shade system and you do go away and it's a hot sunny day and yes, your vents are open, but you're still pushing 90 degrees in there, these plants are calling for water pretty much at the wrong time because we don't really want to top water plants when they're that hot. So in those, well, I have a shade system, so I don't worry about it, but so in those instances, I think I would set it to water a lot and wait a long time to dry off if it could, set it to the least amount of water because it's going to dry and go psst, dry, psst.
Does it make the most sense to water at night when you're not wasting any water to evaporation, or?
I don't know specifically the dynamics of all that. I know I water in the morning and I water at night.
Okay.
It's just what I do. And
It works.
it's some plants like it and some plants don't. So, and I kind of group the ones that I know like it, and that's how I do it. Others may have other methods, you know, to the madness, but.
I think when you water at night, you have to be careful. Like, if you overwater, it can create mold and
Right.
fungus because they don't, dry up as quickly.
Yeah. A lot of people, versus watering the plant at night, water the ground.
Oh.
Water the
So it can
stone.
evaporate in
Yeah,
the
just
water.
hose the stone down, you know, just drench it and then walk out. And it's calling for it. Because Jacques' right that if you overwater at night,
Yeah.
unless it's an outdoor plant, you've got your wind and your air, but in a greenhouse. And that's why, again, I go back to, we talked about the ventilation, and not so much about the HAF fans, but keeping them running 24/7, I did talk about. That's why it's important to keep your fans circulating, because watering at night without air movement is going to create molds. And watering at night with air circulation inside is going to be less apt to have issues with that.
Did you just call it system, a misting system? Is there another name for it?
Nope, misting system. It'll be in the Griffin catalog or any other catalog. I've used the same type of product for 26 years, and I've had the same one for 17 years, and it's worked fine. Never had an issue with it. So another method is called the water table. Plant bench. The water table has the benches a lot of different style benches, whether it's aluminum framed, whether it's galvanized framed. It will have an insert that goes into the plant bench, like a big liner. It looks something like that. So that's in here. At the end, you have a number of controls. You've got solenoids, you've got fertilizing pods, you've got filter system, all electrically charged, all water generated. You have your plant, your pots sitting inside, who knows or has an idea what's the best media to put in a pot when you're using it on a water bench? You had the answer yesterday.
Peat vermiculite?
Yeah. Did you guys hear
Perlite
that?
probably also.
Say that again for me.
Probably some perlite also.
And that's meaning it's not dirt. Because what the water table does, is set up on a timer, or typically a timer, or you can do it manually, but more often a timer, will turn on and it floods. There's one hose that comes in, a tube, a downspout on it, and it floods the table. And it goes for as long as the timer is set, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Floods the whole table, click, it shuts off. Then the drain opens, and that drains. Where does it drain? Here's the greenhouse floor. Normally, we'll bury a reservoir, so it drains back into the reservoir. This is the feed. So you're recycling your water, but it is evaporating, obviously. So it floods, the timer goes off, it drains, goes back into here. In here is a float, so that when that water level goes down because of evaporation on top of the table, then this calls for water and it fills back up to the float, like the float in the back of a toilet. These are more often than not used with fertilizers, but people do just plain water. And you can set any size pot in that. It's important to keep it clean, because when it's dry and the sun's baking on it, then you get your calcium, from your water. So it's good to keep that clean because you don't want your drain to plug.
Where do you get the fresh water into the?
Fresh water comes just from a freshwater source, right to the tank. So that's filling the tank. This is fresh water. Solenoid timer calls for water to the table. It comes up, it goes in, it floods, clicks off, it drains. Because the solenoid on this end will open up the drain. Because otherwise it will just continue to drain. So then that's, when this solenoid closes, this one opens. And then the water just seeps down. Pretty pricey. They have to be perfectly level. So I shoot it in with a laser. Well, I shoot in everything with a laser, but specifically these tables, because otherwise, as you can imagine, if you're unlevel, your water is like this, and this pot is suffering. Some people will put some of the plant bench. I don't think we've ever talked about the actual benches. Well, let's finish with the irrigation. So does anybody have any questions on water tables? Come in all sizes. You can get them 6 feet wide, 30 inches wide, 4 feet wide, 2 feet wide, any length.
How long, when you drain water from that garden bed or like that, so how far, should you drain all, or how does it work?
All the water will drain. Each one, the system, the tray itself is set up on a pitch, meaning the drains in the tray itself are set to pitch. So the table wants to be level, but the tray and on the low ends, that's why these are inserted or countersunk, is that these have a natural drain system to them. So all of the water drains out of the bed. Because if
you're just making the soil wet only.
Exactly, just the soil, just the roots.
Roots.
No top plants.
Okay.
No top watering. Some plants prefer that. Some plants don't. So, but they win either way.
So for seed starting, I use capillary mats and trays on top of those. Do you see people using that on a large scale?
I've never seen it on a large scale. There was a woman in Waterbury who was starting organic, and she was talking about using that in large scale. But again, I build and I leave, so I don't see a lot of the after stuff. So I don't know if she ended up doing that. She was gonna do all the little thimble seed things. That was back when organic was just becoming the click.
Is there a way to automate this?
It's totally automated.
This job is always
This is wired intense, meaning electrical, with all the solenoids and timers and float valves. It's a very busy section. I should have thought of it. I could have brought some pictures from the project that I did take, but you've got your injection systems, you know, the filter, the fertilizer pod may also have its own reservoir of concentrated fertilizer, so that when this, and of course it's going to be diluted, when this dilution becomes too weak, it calls for more solid fertilizer. And that's just, it's all in the system.
How often do you need to refill fresh water? You get fresh water.
This float will tell you, you won't even know it's filling.
Oh,
There's
okay,
a float
okay.
inside.
Float, that is-
Anybody know what that is?
yeah.
In the back of the toilet, right?
Sure, sure.
There's the float. You flush, water goes out, water goes down. This float turns the water feed on. Water goes up, this float stops. When that float hits, it stops the water coming in. Same scenario for that. When it gets low enough, it calls for water, the float drops, it comes back up, and it shuts the solenoid off. All the solenoids are all electrically charged, low volt, but initial 110 to everything. When electricians look at this and when plumbers look at this, they just go, this is gonna cost you a fortune, ma'am. But it's when they get into it, they realize it's just simple plumbing and simple wiring. There's nothing special about it. I plumbed and wired these myself in states where I don't have to be licensed, like Vermont. In Vermont, I can wire and plumb anything without having a license. Massachusetts, Connecticut, I can't touch it. I can install the pods, you know, I can install the controls, hang them, but I can't do anything beyond that. And even consultation with electricians and plumbers, I'm a little, because if I tell them something that they don't agree with or use, it could come back on me. So a lot of times I just hung it, that's all I know. I'll just play dumb. And it's just protection, just to protect. I don't like to do that, but I've been burned before. So, right, burn once, shame on you, burn twice. Or no, burn once, shame on him, burn twice, shame on you. I think that's how they say it.
Do you have a rough idea of how much something like that would cost for different sizes?
Oh, if this were a this was a 6x9 footer, and I think it was about $1,600, $1,700 for all the materials for that water table.
So it's like materials alone, not installation?
Yeah, but, so there's that table there. There's this table here that has all the controls to it, right? All your pods, solenoids, and everything are all there. You've got another table here, another table here, another table here. All you're doing at that point is winking your water. Because your solenoids, everybody's filling at the same time. So your solenoid is all filling at the same time, all the tables. So these become less expensive. So your main one is the cost. The main system is the cost, and then add on. You might want to consider getting a larger reservoir if you go multiple tables, so we gauge it for the gallons. the tank doesn't have to be buried, but it gets it out of the way. Sometimes it can simply go underneath the bench. Any other thoughts or questions on the water tables?
Most tanks that you install in greenhouses, do you like make sure that they're not exposed to the sun, or that that they don't let the sunlight into the tank? Is that important?
Definitely, yeah. Because you don't want hot water going into your plants. So it's either buried or below underneath the bench, but not exposed. Because you can picture, that thing heats up to 80 degrees, and you don't want that kind of water. I don't know. Who can shed any light onto that, if hot water onto a plant is different than temperate water, room temperature?
I don't know, but
I wouldn't recommend it. It wouldn't seem like the plant would like, it's like going in for a glass of cold water and you turn the hot on instead. So, another method is called drip irrigation. Anybody have any idea what that means?
Is there holes in it?
That's right. It's basically set up like a misting system, meaning and you might have another support center line. H2O. Again, these drip irrigation is typically set up on a timer. No solenoids involved, just a timer. It can be, and the unit's a plug-in unit, so you can do a household timer. It doesn't have to be a fancy greenhouse timer whatsoever. Regular household timer. You set it to go on for 15, 20 minutes, or for 4 hours, whatever you do. There's a couple of drip irrigation methods. This one is the simplest of, and basically you penetrate the black tubing, which comes in a roll. I guess you can use PVC, it's just a drip. And that's basically what it does, it just drips into the pot for however long you want it to. Some people will the black hose is just loose, and they might just bring in a box of plants and stuff, and they just take the hose and they'll snake it through the plants, and they'll set it right at the drip spot, right at the hole, and it can go, all over the plant bench, and then wherever they put their pot, they've got a hole type of thing. So the less precise method, just wherever, more precise. And you've seen, probably seen soaker hoses, right, that they sell at garden centers. People run into their gardens, their outdoor gardens. People will sometimes use that if they're doing a soil bed. But you got to be careful with that, because if your timer fails, then you're going to soak the heck out of your bed. So they're just running the soaker hose through the soil, and then they're planting in. So this is actually deep filled with soil, and they're planting direct. So you've got your plants coming right out of the soil. When you do this type of planter box, things to be careful with, or to look out for. Mine's 3 feet deep. You want to think about the root of the plant and what it's going to do and how big it's going to want to get. Or maybe it's the carrot, or maybe it's the onion. You want to know what your depth is. Typically, I'll do weed mat first. The bottom of my planter, I have large gaps in between the wood. And then I just have gravel underneath it. So, weed mat, filter paper, whatever, stone, maybe number 3, which means that's 3/4 to an inch of stone, size stone, 3-4 inches. And then dirt. Aeration's important. Every year changing the soil in the whole box is important. But more importantly, aeration, because you just don't want that to continue to pack. And I have great luck with all my root vegetables. This is my favorite part of the greenhouse.
How deep is your plant?
Mine's 3 feet. 3 feet deep.
And what kind of soil do you put in it?
It depends, I use a mix. You know, I use just a plant mix. I've experimented with some of the different numbers, but some people just use regular old soil out of the garden. But again, the most important thing is because that's an inside box, it's not getting the rains that will typically sterilize a soil, you know, wash the soil down through because you're contained, you're spot watering, even if you're running your garden, your soaker hose through that. It's not the same as getting a dump of rain 2 or 3 times a week to wash the soil down through. Any questions on those?
I feel like I missed something, sorry. What are the little boxes along the bottom?
That's how I have it framed on the bottom.
Oh, okay.
I just use cedar, and this allows any excess moisture goes down through the rocks. The stone's more like for some air because I'm getting air through here into the soil, and then this is any excess water, so it doesn't sit.
Nice.
And again, I just have, just all stone underneath all of my benches, and then I have blue stone walkways in between the aisles too. It's just more comfortable on the feet. I think my wife doesn't think. But she
dust
got,
or blue stone?
excuse me?
Blue stone dust or blue
No,
stone?
blue stone. Yeah, big. And it took me, after I built the greenhouse, the recycled greenhouse, it took me 1.5 years to get the 8-foot by 8-foot hot tub out of it, which is what my wife wanted. And I put up with it for that long. It was taking up all the room. And she would be doing chemicals in the hot tub and then opening up the hot tub and all the chemicals are going to the glass, you know, the shock and the treatments, and the kids were doing the colored bubble stuff. It's all fun if it were outside, which is where it is now. So, and I wanted my greenhouse, my space, I wanted that space. I'm not much of a hot tub guy. I'm hot enough all the time. I don't need a hot tub. My hot tub is 90 degrees. That's a hot tub for me. So yeah. Yeah, you guys probably noticed humidity and I are not very cordial to each other. You'd think I weigh 110 pounds with the amount of sweating I do. So, plant benches. Pretty much there's 2 styles. There's what they call stationary and rolling. So, you guys probably pretty clear, right? Stationary bench won't move unless you push it or pick it up and move it. Rolling bench will do all of that and then some by itself. Stationary bench, boom. Typically, people use stationary benches because they'll have at least 2 feet in between each bench to get down through. Some have 3 feet, some have 4 feet because they bring garden carts down through there. So it depends on the size of the operation. If you just want access to it for watering and pruning or picking, or do you need cart availability for loading and transporting? benches typically will be for larger production. They've got 1,000 square feet of greenhouse floor space. When they're feet. You walk into that greenhouse, and all you see is plant benches, and you've got 2 feet. The only way you're going to get to this one is if you roll this bench this way to get your 2 feet there, and then there, and then there. So you've gained 2, 4, 6, 8 by any length of the greenhouse or width of floor space, because all your benches can be tight together, and then they can roll left or right. And it's just set up, cross braces, galvanized piping, tubing, and then this just rolls. The whole bench top rolls on top. These have to be perfectly level. There's a stop and there's a stop. For obvious reasons, you don't want to roll your bench right off the top of its legs. Perfectly level, because when you have a 30-foot bench by 6 feet wide and it's loaded with plants, it's very heavy. If you're off a 1/4 inch on your elevation and you've rolled that bench this way 2 feet and you're in there and that 30-foot long, 50-foot long by 6-foot wide plant bench loaded wants to roll against you, you pretty much know it. Because you're always doing this, you're always pushing it away. Then it rolls back, push it away from you. So we make those perfectly level. Pretty much when people want rolling benches, I insist upon doing a concrete floor, because you can't go in there with individual pads, footings for it. It's just, it gets crazy with the number of footings you have to put down for all those legs. As you can imagine, there's a lot of support with the rolling bench, or any of the benches. They're very sturdy, have to be cross bracing, very rigid systems. So that's more for production house. You don't see that much in retail, if ever, or mom and pops, your smaller residentials. So that's all the typical, the expanded metal tops, aluminum side rails, galvanized bottom rails, galvanized legs. Other bench materials, I use cypress, I use redwood, and I use cedar. Any questions with the benches?
Questions going back to irrigation.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell a rough cost of the misting system?
Yeah, the pod system is like $126, and that comes with like 12 nozzles in the fly swatter, what I call it.
126?
Yeah, roughly.
And that's called pod system?
Misting system.
Oh, okay.
Yep, misting.
And you
I
can
think
run,
said
To avoid PVC piping in the greenhouse? Did you say that yesterday?
For electrical situations, this you really just can't get away from it, because that's what the manufacturers of the misting system have designed their brass fittings for, is PVC, so you're limited. I guess you could do copper, but you'd have to go extra lengths as far as being able to seal that threaded piece into the
And what
into
happens
copper.
to the PVC? It's a UV. It's affected by.
By UV.
gets brittle.
It gets brittle. Yeah. But in a long time, several years, it's just not allowed for electrical because code doesn't allow it. But you could do it in your own home or your own greenhouse if you wanted, because of expense. Or if you don't want to use that at all, you're they'll use gray wire, which is designed for underground or exposed. They call it gray wire.
How many misters can you run off of one pod?
I have like 26 nozzles off of my one, and it's fine.
And they're every 3 feet or so? Or?
Yeah, and you can space them anything. Mine are probably like this, 18 inches or so apart. And you can space them anything. Anyway, I can't imagine you couldn't run, 200 lineal feet of, because it's really just the water feed, and that's pressure from your hose, from your water source. So there's no reason why one system, won't control it all. Because that's not, the only thing that's doing is shutting the water off and on. So, but if you have a pressure issue from your house, that will limit, I suppose, how long you can go.
And the plant benches that you have built, is that the one that you showed us with the planks along the bottom and stone? With about 3 feet of dirt and misters running into that?
I don't have misting system into those because that time of year typically we're home. So, and that definitely wants to be one. My root vegetables definitely want to be one. The plants that we really missed are just, again, all the poolside plants and my roses.
Do you have any good recommendations for soil resources?
Your garden centers have all sorts of soil mixes available. That's the best place. Get some good quality loam, because some of the garden centers have the big piles of that versus bags of it. I see that. I've often wondered because I see that even in larger production where they're bringing in pallets of soil mix versus mixing their own soils, like bringing in a load of quality topsoil and then adding their own fertilizers or nutrients to it. They all buy the bags, pallets of bags, and use them for potting all their plants. So it must be the economical way to go. I'm only thinking. Those bags are pretty cheap, right? They're like $3 to $6, I think.
But they're not cheap compared to bulk.
Not compared to bulk, no. But wonder if once you start adding the fertilizers and all that to it, if it starts to, I don't know.
In the greenhouse that I work at, we mix it.
What's that?
You
I
mix
work
it.
at a greenhouse and my boss industrial designed his own mixing machine. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It starts on one end of the bench, like completely handmade, but a very serious machine. And we lay layers of bags and water it and throw, fertilizers in. And then this machine runs on something like a bicycle chain and mixes it for us. And that's the hard part, mixing it. But I go home and I just have a big blue tub, and I bought peat moss, I got some nice topsoil, my own compost, throw some fertilizer in, time release, and then I just mix it by hand and do a few batches.
What are you, genius? Because the mixing is
It
the
is
work.
ingenious, this
The
thing
mixing
is
is the work if
awesome.
you're talking yards of it.
It's just incredible.
Made your job easier
Yeah.
and cleaner a little bit.
I think Vermont compost, probably most people have heard of it. They make really good soil mixes.
And they'll sell huge bags of it, like not pallets of bags, but bags that are the size of a pallet, 6 feet tall.
Is the Intervale still shut down?